Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're here to talk about the offense from that AFC Championship game loss to the Chiefs. Obviously, not the biggest upper of an episode, but here to talk to me about it is Frazier Tafar. Frazier, how you doing?
Doing good, Ken. As you mentioned, wasn't the best result. Disappointing to be at the game and just see everything happen. Just wishing we had a different outcome, but alas, we're here to break down what happened on offense.
Yeah, obviously not what anybody wanted. So always the end of the season is abrupt. I kind of liken it to a great craps roll if you ever have one, and you particularly if you're one of the people who likes to get a lot of numbers, you get heavily invested in the roll as it progresses, and whenever you do go out, there's a lot on the line, and that's exactly what happened to the Baltimore Ravens here on Sunday afternoon and evening, and unfortunately, the season is abruptly over here. I think one of the things everybody is pointing to today and yesterday is a lack of commitment to running the football.
Yeah, and it was evident after the 17-7 lead. It felt like a lot in the moment in the game of the AFC Championship caliber. I think it felt like a lot, so I'm not going to say I understand the reasoning behind trying to press to get back in the game, but to abandon it altogether when running the ball was probably the most successful thing we could do all day, I think that was the most disappointing part.
Yeah, no, the running backs did not shine to a degree that they should have been given the ball a lot. I mean, they had 6 carries and I think 23 yards in total among the running backs. I may be slightly off on that, but it was about that. And then 2 more carries by Flowers for just a handful of yards. Let's make sure we get this right. It's worth trying to do this right. So yeah, 6 carries for 23 for the running backs, 2 carries for 4 for Flowers. The only guy who ran the ball effectively really was Jackson, who had 8 for 54. A lot of that was scrambling, obviously. In terms of the run game, I guess I'd say a couple things. First of all, the Ravens it never felt at any point in this game like they could afford to squander a possession against the Chiefs. They weren't playing a team that they, had a big lead over at any point during the game. The Chiefs led the entire way, unless it was tied at 0-7. But they built up a 14-7 lead, which seemed really large at the time.
Yep.
Without being stopped, basically.
Yeah, and I think the tone was almost set in the beginning of the game when we went 3 and out. I think it was disappointing to see us not even get 3 points or at least a first down. It was a foreshadowing for what was to come the rest of the night, I feel like.
2 runs on that drive for, I think, 3 yards, and then they had an incomplete on 3rd and 7, so that didn't work out. A lot of the times I look at this game and I do think it's a game where they couldn't afford to get behind the chains, and have obviously behind schedule off, get into 2nd and 9 situations, etc. They really did need to move the football on first down effectively. I think that effectively that should take a run pass balance to do it well. I thought there was an option. The Chiefs were fairly light in this game with the loss of Noddy, who's the 317-pound guy that is probably their biggest lineman in the middle. Chris Jones might be a little bit heavier, but it's pretty close. And they otherwise they have some undersized guy. Tershawn Wharton, is in the 290 range. But they have generally some lighter guys that they play up front who could have been pushed around a little bit. Yeah,
they tried it in the beginning on the first run. KC did come out with 3 down linemen in a 3-4 look. I mean, they didn't get nothing on that, and then we kind of squandered that possession. And then the second possession, we did come out and have a good power run with Gus in Q1, 550 on 1st and 10. Mm-hmm. That was the best run of the day, I think, other than a Lamar run. I think it was tough to see, and also the fourth and 3. That was on the same drive as well. The big hole for Jackson.
Yeah. 4th and 1, and it was 5 tight ends on the play. So they had 5 linemen, 5 tight ends, and Jackson, and they powered through and got the first down. But that was a really nice. It was nice to see them be able to just run over the Chiefs once like that, And actually, it was a very good cutback by Jackson there to find the spot, to be very patient and wait for his blocks and to get through the second level. It was one of his really good plays of the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think if he doesn't dance with the guy and try and mess around with him, trying to fist stiff arm him, there's potential he can keep breaking it. But ultimately, the drive ended in the amazing touchdown to Flowers, so it all worked out in the end. On mute.
Yeah, about a 4-play sequence there was about the best the Ravens had the entire game, and that culminated with that touchdown to Flowers. Let's talk about this a little bit. They did make adjustments in the second half, and both teams did. And it's kind of, I thought this was a game that we would see a battle of adjustments a little bit, because Spagnuolo is known for doing that in game. But the Chiefs went to a very different approach in the second half from the first. The first half, they rushed a lot of extra men, and it's not like they completely gave up on that in the second half, because they did some of it. But the other thing they did is really use committed spies, and often 2 on the same play. So they did a fair number of plays with a 3-man rush and 2 spies, and that's a really extreme control Jackson way to look at things. And also it forces your offensive linemen to be on their toes and kind of face those spies a lot of the time, instead of helping on blocks and getting double teams on the 3 guys who are rushing. So you can end up with a delayed blitz that comes in and whatnot. But I thought that was very effective, generally speaking, although the Ravens had a lot of ATS opportunities in the second half. And in fact, I think they had 11 in the fourth quarter. I'm going to count this up really quickly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's 11. The very first play of the fourth quarter was the end of a drive that there was a pass plus a fumble. Yeah, the one they going in fumble by Flowers, and that was the first of 11 in the fourth quarter where they had more than a 3-second pocket. Really shows up in Jackson's time to throw for the game, which was 3:34.
Yeah, I think I had drive 9. I had 1, 2, 3, about 3 or 4 ample time and spaces on that drive. The pick that Lamar threw in the end zone.
Okay, that was the 10th drive. Okay, but there was an NRM -1 in there, so it was a kneel. Yeah, that one I scored it for 8 on that drive. 8 ample time and space on that drive alone. Which is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, Lamar had a lot of time that drive, so it was unfortunate for him to throw that pick in that crucial point of the game. But other than that, I feel like there was time, but we didn't punish them with the time they gave us. Right. Whether it be Lamar not being set with his footwork when receivers are breaking open, or timing not be there, or whatever the case may be, it just didn't work out on Sunday.
Yeah, a lot of the Chiefs' strength is at corner, so they're very effective being sticky with receivers. That's honestly what that defense does better than anything else, and that's led to a lot of their sack success. So a lot of the Ravens' scheme on the back end that helps assist a complementary pressure system up front for the Ravens. So the Chiefs, not dissimilar. They just have a lot of talent at cornerback that they can make work for them, and they certainly did in this game. So, hats off to them in terms of what they did defensively in the game. They certainly got it done.
Yep.
Solid offensive line performance. No tackle rotation in this game. Roddy Stanley did leave for 2 plays with maybe a brace problem, maybe an injury. Couldn't tell which, but he was back on the very next series. So anyway, thought he finished the year pretty strong. We'll talk about the offensive line and the scoring in part 2. Frazier and I usually take our time with that, but general, I thought it wasn't the offensive line that really let the Ravens offense down in this game.
Yeah, I think it was. There was occasions where you do get beat. I mean, that happens sometimes. It's the NFL. I think it was more so the failed blitz pickups that hurt the Ravens.
Yeah,
in the sense of getting sacks or drive killers. I think O-line played pretty good. I wish we would have seen them more in the run game and actually seen them get down and dirty.
Yeah. Definitely those off-man blitzes, odd-man blitzes, extra-man blitzes were a real problem for the Ravens, because the Chiefs seemed to match them up with spots where there was not an available blocker.
Perfect.
And, they just were very effective, well-timed, and it's just a nightmare to just had that happening play after play, and Lamar having a lot of difficulty dealing with it. They're outsnapped on the game 73-57. This is a game where, after the first 2 drives, when, obviously things were not going well, the defense really did their part. I think if you're assigning the blame offense and defense, it's a little bit of shame maybe that the defense allowed the Chiefs to so easily gain the lead, because I think there are problems that accrue from that. But I still say you hold the Chiefs to 17 points, you got to beat them.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I was in the stands when they went up about 14-7. I was wondering, how do we even stop these guys? Because it seemed like we didn't have an answer at the time. But once halftime kicked in, it seemed like we kind of settled in and we figured out exactly what their game plan was. And it was understandable to the point where if Kelsey was uncovered, especially in the slot, it's a screen to him. I mean, it was just at certain points you knew exactly what was coming, and I'm glad the Ravens keyed in, especially in the crucial point. But when people want to point to the last drive where MVS catches it on Mollett, you really can't put that on the defense at that point. I think they gave the offense enough chances to at least get to a tie game, or, it's not, you can't put it on the defense. The defense keeps us in every playoff game that I've been alive to see personally.
Yeah, they did a great job on that particular play, getting pressure on Mahomes on the play. Pierce did, and he was just about a half step late, getting the hand in his face, where Mahomes would have a very difficult time getting that ball on target to MVS if it hadn't in fact been batted down. But asking for a 3-and-out against the Chiefs is, you are down to the last refuge of a scoundrel prayer to get that done, and it's just not it's not a situation you want to put your team in at that point. And that was the offense is doing in that fourth quarter with all their missed opportunities. With the if you want to count them up, they had the interception in the end zone, they had the fumble going in, they had one is on the officials, and that's the no holding call unlikely that turned that into a field goal instead of a touchdown potentially. But the truth of the matter was that the Ravens were still going to need to get the ball back, even if they had gotten their touchdown at that point. They might have had a chance to win, but they were still going to have to get the ball back with a 3-and-out. And that's just a lot to handle.
They also missed their opportunity on the second drive of the third quarter. They were in field goal range, and this is when Justice Hill missed his blitz pickup, and Lamar got sacked, and that took him out of field goal range, and we had to punt. That was another opportunity we missed as well. So I counted four straight opportunities where we could have scored at least a field goal, and we weren't able to.
Definitely extremely frustrating. And we did a little exercise on the show last night. You can do this if you want, in terms of of the 5 big losses. I don't know if you've really been a fan for all of them. What year do you become a fan?
2006.
Okay, so anyway, you might be then. So the games are 2006, the 11 loss to the Patriots in the AFC Championship, the 2019 loss, the 2023 loss, and I'm missing one, the 2008 AFC Championship loss to the Steelers at Pittsburgh. So if you have those 5 games, and you have to rank them in order of least painful to most painful, or most painful to least painful, I guess is the way we're doing it, from 1 to 5. Think about that. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end of the show, and how you would do that. One of the things that showed up in all those games a lot, and in playoff games in general for the Ravens, has been interceptions and fumbles in the red zone, and really inside the 5-yard line. If you go back to that 2006 game, McNair had an interception right before halftime inside the 5-yard line. Lamar had the 100 and whatever yard interception return that really sealed the game. It took a turn to 10-3 game where the Ravens were heading in to tie it into a 17-3 game. The Huntley fumble going in that Hubbard returned for a touchdown. And then, of course, the Flowers fumble that the Chiefs bring out to the 20 here. So pretty horrible Baltimore tradition of losing the ball near the goal line. And it does happen. It shouldn't happen that often, given the number of playoff games the Ravens have played in their history. And the general success they've had in them. It's really incredible to accumulate 4 like that in 4 losses when you only have, 13 losses now overall, 17-13, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it in perspective, at least it's not like the Bills where you miss field goals in the Super Bowl, and you get there at least, but you miss every opportunity. So I think when you kind of put it in perspective, I think I've kind of disassociated myself from the team since the loss, and I've kind of been able to think of it from more of a level head. And this season was great, and what we did and the things that we accomplished. Of course, we fell short, but I think I'm more disappointed in not dying on the hill that we were on all year. I think being the running team that we came into the playoffs as, we established ourselves in the divisional round as a running team, putting 200 points on the Texans and going against lesser run defense in the Chiefs and not being able to put up a performance. It's just frustrating to see this happen to a great team.
It is pretty remarkable that they didn't give it a shot. At least, some read options, just go ahead and show that. Even read option handed off, read option boot left, with Lamar. I mean, just some set of plays, which is going to keep you in line with the sticks. And they just did not see that happen. And yeah, it's certainly frustrating. There's been other times, by the way, in Ravens history where they've given up on the run in the playoffs, and I felt like it was the right thing. And one of them was in Jamal Lewis's 2,000-yard season. They really gave up on the run against Tennessee in that wild card playoff game in Baltimore, and I thought they almost did it too late. He had like 17 carries for 38 or something. It was a truly lousy rushing performance on the day. The offensive line wasn't really looking that good in terms of getting him some level 2 opportunities, and Tennessee was very physical. And I felt like, I know it's Anthony Wright at quarterback, but they've got to do something that's counter tendency to get the ball going. So this was not like that. I share the frustration over the not sticking with the run. Let's talk about a little bit more that happened in this game. The series success rate is something I look at. They went only 16 of 27 when they had a first down. Getting another first down or touchdown, that ain't going to do it, period. Not against really any team, but it certainly is not going to do it unless you put out just an amazing defensive effort to win a very 13-10 game or something, because that's not going to get you very many points.
Yeah, I think it was evident. Like I mentioned, since the beginning of the game, I think going 3 and out was just, we came out flat as a team. And then the defense picked it up, and the offense wasn't able to follow.
So you end up with 16 runs and 41 passes. Obviously not ideal. We need to talk about those passes a little bit. A lot of people, there is some talk about how the Ravens run to win as opposed to win because they don't win because they run because they win. And that really is true of the Ravens this year. A lot of their, the fact that they're very close to 50% run and pass for the year is a function of the fact that they're winning football games, and they're able to still impose their will on a lot of those teams after the game is already not in doubt. And a lot of their, piling up the yards that got them to the Fangio line game after game, which, by the way, they didn't do in this game. It's a playoff game. I'm not even sure if it counts for record ball purposes, but they didn't make 100 yards in this game. A lot of the times they've done it because they've been piling up yards after the game is already not in doubt. They did that against San Francisco, and they did a couple, at least one other time this year, where they just barely made it at the end of the game. I think the San Francisco game, they actually made it on their last run of the game. So that was one of the strange ones.
I think one thing we can critique about Monken is his early game run game. I don't want to say it like a double entendre, but early in the game, it seems like the offense isn't able to get off the line of scrimmage and have the effective runs like they do later in the game. Obviously, that's a product of us scoring and opposing our will, but still being able to run the ball from the get, I should be an emphasis going into this offseason, because that helps us establish the pass like we want to with Lamar. But I mentioned in the matchup show last week that we were going to pass to open up the run. We passed, but we really didn't run. So I think trying to get to that point where running the ball as a true threat in the beginning of the game, I think needs to be the component in the offseason.
Yeah, and mine, of course, for that same show was stay multiple was one of the most important things, and the Ravens just needed to have both. They needed to have some design runs for Lamar in a game like that against the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs linebackers are fairly well, and safeties for that matter, are fairly well set up to take advantage of that. It's still a case where you need to try and punish them. You need to punish them for a few things. You need to punish them for looking at Lamar.
Yep.
If they want to play zone defense against Lamar, well, okay, but you got to then have zone busting plays. You got to have your tight ends sit down in space. You got to have your wide receivers know how to find those spots and stay there. You got to have Lamar and your receivers on the same page in terms of getting the ball to them at that spot. And I don't think the Ravens were able to consistently do that. That's something where there's too much times where Lamar was throwing hurriedly in that first half in particular against trail coverage and not able to make that work. At times, like the very first 3 and out, the third down play was a trail coverage play that was a little bit behind the receiver and got knocked down by the trailing cover guy.
And on that play, I think of the one thing I noticed this game, Lamar got stuck to his first read, and I don't know if the coaches mentioned that to him on the sideline. Once he would miss his first read, he would look at his second read and then try to make something happen. I think it was tough to watch him miss and hold the ball and have to scramble because he wasn't able to be on time. I think that first ball to Aguilar that was missed, if he just waits for a second, he had enough time to look at the backside dig to Zay, and he was already at the sticks and he's beat his guy inside. So yeah, I think the progression of Lamar is not – I think having trust in the offensive line is definitely where it needs to start.
There is another problem going on with that, though. There's a 6-man rush on the play. It's not one where you can sit back there and take, read one, read two, read two. It's not a play like that. The play happens too quickly. And so even though the play, it was ball out quick, we had a block by 43 in the middle. So Hill made a block. I don't have it registered as a bad block or anything like that. It didn't turn into a pressure. So it looks like he picked it up. From what I could, but it wasn't going to hold up for 3 seconds either. So he needs to get rid of that ball quickly. That does lead to a lot of first read throws or potentially bailout throws where, you go to your number one receiver, where he is, and you hope he'll catch the ball even on a contested basis. It's just not an ideal circumstance for throwing it. And some of that you got to give the Chiefs the credit for. I mean, they're defensive players. They're in particular their 3 corners, but also the way they schemed up their blitz of this game was just very effective against Lamar.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about some more detail on Lamar's game here, because I think when we get to this, you realize a couple things about what went right and what went wrong for the Ravens offense on the day. And it didn't all go wrong. Certainly a lot did. But Kansas City rushed 5+ 20 times on 41 plays that resulted in a pass or sack. So that's 46% of the time. He was 8 for 19 on those throws. There's also 1 sack, by the way. That was the Omenahu sack early on, the strip sack.
Yep.
3.7 second sack, roughly. Ronnie Stanley held his block for about 3.5 of that. Unfortunately, it was a case where it just wasn't quite enough. And it really, I didn't charge the sack to Stanley because of that. It's a play where Lamar needs to either move up in the pocket and make a throw, or he needs to take off. And I think those are the 2 options there. I don't think that's either case. It was a clean enough pocket that he could have made some yards on the ground, but staying in the pocket and waiting for things to happen was not on the menu for that play.
Yep, I agree. And the disappointing part was we were backed up in our end zone, and it looked like we were going to have a good drive coming out with a really good completion to Likely to start. But it's just the 5-man pressures, especially on the delayed blitzes with the plus. I think that was the big part in the game. As mentioned, the bad blitz pickups by the running backs was partially the issue in not being able to effectively get the pass pro where it needs to be. When we did have ample time and space, it wasn't like we mentioned. It wasn't like we were making them pay for it either. So
No, by that time, by the time that they were getting a lot of their ample time space, I'll get to this in a minute. The Lamar was already fairly flustered in the game, but 8 for 19 for 85 net yards with ample time space. That's 4.3. I'm sorry, this is a 5+ man rush. 8 for 19 for 85 yards, 4.3 yards per play with a 5-man rush. You got to find a way to do better than that. You got to have a scheme that gets the ball out quickly, that gets you some short completion, that backs the other team off the blitz. Obviously, that's not doing it. If you can hold Lamar Jackson to 4.3 yards per pass play, they will literally blitz you all day, because a lot of that is when it's happening is high variance. He's getting some big plays, but he's also taking some losses and whatnot. And defense loves that. They will trade some big plays for some losses because variance is required always to get the other team off the field. And the way to look at that is go to an extreme example. If an offense was able to just get their average yards per play on every single play, well, they'd march right down the field as long as they get over 3 1/3 yards per play, and every time they'd score. So it should be obvious that variance is required, and this is a good example of a gamble that Kansas City was perfectly happy with. Let's move on. 4-man rush. He was 9 of 14 for 141 yards, 8.3 yards per play. Basically, that was where Kansas City was at their weakest, was when they rushed 4. They still had some problems maintaining lane discipline with 4, which led to some of Lamar's scramble plays. So even the 8.3 yards per pass play doesn't really get at all of the problems that accrued to the Chiefs in those circumstances. So they gave away some extra yards there as well.
Yep. And I think the 4-man rush was our chance to get back in the game. It was just tough not being able to see us capitalize, especially on some of the slot fades that we had to Aguilar or Beckham, and just not being able to get the ball close enough where there were some ticky-tack holding PI calls that could have been called, but the ball not being relatively close might have been an issue with those.
Right. Certainly was on the interception, and the ball's underthrown like that, and the front guy makes a play. They're generally not going to throw a PI flag, whether or not it was really appropriate. It might not have been either.
Yeah.
I could understand it, but there's no doubt about the holding call, and the problem with the holding calls is the relativity of the two holding calls. If you're going to call Mollett for holding earlier in the game, as it did, which is a complete ticky-tack call, you got to call an obvious one like that on whoever was covering Leckley at the time. I don't remember who it was, whether it was McDuffie or somebody else, but anyway, it was a call that had to be made, and bad call in that case. And there were a couple in this game that really went against the Ravens in that way. The Chiefs point to one in the end zone, which could have been a tripping call for a safety. I think that there undoubtedly there were some bad calls. There's certainly a lot of holds during the game, including a big one that didn't get called on Van Noy. And there's some other stuff that we don't need to talk about. But trying to give you a chance on give yourself a chance on some holding calls is kind of secondary unless you're going to really try and beat the other team for long pass interference plays. And they didn't put themselves in a position to do that. I completely agree that, when you're going for that incremental gain on the long pass and you've got the 3 possibilities, the 3 true outcomes, if you want to call it that, you've got incomplete, you've got a completion, and you've got a pass interference. There's really an interception. It should be in there too. But generally speaking, you try and throw the ball so it's one of those 3 outcomes. I'm all for that, and you really need to make sure you get your share of pass interference calls on those plays by doing what Flacco and Torrey Smith did so effectively years ago, in terms of having that ball placed out in front of the receiver a fair amount and having the defensive back get very grabby.
I think the one call, if I had to really be mad about, I think it's the OBJ in the end zone. It might have been on the pick drive. I think there was contact when OBJ was breaking through onto the corner and grabbed his arm. I mean, you just can't do that. I don't know if that's legal, but then OBJ is just going up with one hand. So I don't know what that was about. The ball was close enough, because I think the OBJ could have made a play on it if he wasn't impeded. So that was probably the only route and the only play that made me mad from a PI perspective.
All right. Well, fair enough. In looking at that one, I was not convinced that he would have gotten to the ball anyway. I think the ball was probably uncatchable, but I understand the position. There's no doubt about it. It was very handsy defensive back play, not called. And it seemed like when you look back at the Mollett call early in that game and just compare it to the way the game was otherwise called, very frustrating.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not saying that was the reason they lost, but it certainly didn't help.
Didn't help at all.
Late in the game, the Chiefs went to the 3-man rush 4 times. Lamar was 3 of 4 for 25 yards on those plays. So did okay on that, but they were using 2 spies and really guarding all the exits versus Lamar at that point. They did not want Lamar to beat them with his legs. And is an interesting kind of a twist to things. I wouldn't say it really worked out for them, but they certainly were showing new looks all the way into the fourth quarter against the Ravens.
Yeah, definitely looks they wouldn't show if they were in a tight game. So disappointing to see that.
Ample time, space, ball out quick, and pressure. Now, we talked about ample time, space a little bit. He had 18 total ample time and space opportunities. That's 44% of the time. It's very close to the highest percentage of the year. I think it might be in 45 or 46 in one game earlier this year. But that's an outrageous amount of ample time and space. Now, normally, when you have a 3-second pocket, I'd expect Lamar to go for about 10 yards a throw, maybe 9 to 10 in that range. Anywhere is fine. 5.7 is not fine.
Yep.
And that's what he had. So just terrible results, frankly. And if you want to talk about how many yards they lost on that, maybe think about 38 times 3.8 times 18, which is, I mean, just on those plays alone, that maybe cost them about 68 yards. If I'm looking at that in terms of apportioning out where his performance was not up to snuff. The next category is also bad, the ball out quick. Now, ball out quick was important in this game because a fair number of the ball out quicks were about to develop into pressure. So there is a subtle distinction there when Joe Burrow is just constantly throwing to the outside because he doesn't have the arm strength to test the Ravens deep. Those are high percentage completions that aren't generally taking a chance with the football. They don't have a high risk of being batted down. I mean, they generally are likely going to be complete and likely for not very much yardage. In this case, Lamar had some problems with incompletes. We got knocked off the field by having Chris Jones knock down a pass of just that.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
And it's just, extremely frustrating, obviously, to have that happen. But 3.4 yards per play with the ball out quickly, which occurred 10 times.
Yep. And one of them was an incomplete pass to Justice Hill on the flat. Lamar just put him on too hot. And I don't know. That was just
they weren't going to get the first down on that play, which was what frustrated me more about it, because it was about 3 yards short of the sticks and the Chiefs defender was bearing down, but still, ugh.
I know. And then on top of that, I wrote down in my notes, they had trips to the left, like stacked trips, and more players than they could cover on that side. So I'm not sure why. Back to my point about Lamar locking into his first read and not being able to get back to the other side. I don't know. I know it's hard to be an NFL quarterback, but I don't know. That's all I got to say.
You got to try and decode that play, decode that bunch formation, and find out who's gonna rub free. And that was a big part of the Chiefs game, obviously. And one of the really bad penalty calls that hasn't been talked about is the OPI that they didn't call on Watson when he absolutely shouldered Hamilton off the play. He ran directly up the field, threw his shoulder into Hamilton, and kept going as if, that's the way the route's supposed to be run. And Hamilton was the guy who had to emerge from that bunch formation with coverage of Kelsey. Kelsey got a big conversion on third down in the fourth quarter, and that
was that the outbreaking route on the rollout.
Outbreaking left.
Yep. Yes, I remember that.
Trips left. Yep.
That was in the end zone I was sitting in. It was like poetry in motion when he threw that. I mean, break left. I couldn't even explain it. It was perfect, but it was just tough to watch at that angle. Defensively, they did their job. It was upsetting to see how Kelsey just was not able to be controlled. It's almost like we didn't game plan for him all week. So I don't know what that was about, but other than that, it was okay. But with the ball out quick, it's disappointing to see that wasn't successful, which should have been the emphasis of the game. That was my key matchups that I had. And they tried to get to it, and it just wasn't successful. I don't know what. I think this was just one of those scenarios where we just ran into a bad matchup.
You got to be able to slow down the blitz. And one thing that the weather did not help the Ravens, despite it being a little rainy. It would have helped if it was a little more rainy. Frankly, I think the passing game would have been more effective because the footing was still very good for the Chiefs cornerbacks. And usually the footing becomes a problem for the defensive players much more than the offensive players who, they're sticking their foot in the ground, making a hard cut. And you're a defensive back, you're making a reactive cut, and you have to try and do things. That's where the real opportunities to slip come in. If the field had been a little slicker, it actually I think would have benefited the Ravens. You don't get weather to order, unfortunately, for the NFL, but it would have been a nice break if the weather would have been just a little crappier for the fans. Ended up being a very nice day from my perspective. Yeah, for football.
There was just like that little mist in the third quarter, but other than that, it was nice.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get to pressure. 13 times, 32%. It's not a terrible relationship between pressure and BOQ, and it's certainly when you get 44% ample time and space versus 32% pressure, you treat that trade anytime. Yep. That kind of relationship you take it anytime. Anyway, Lamar's very effective under pressure in this game, although he was terrible with ATS and BOQ. So it's an inverted game. So an inverted yield curve is when the yields at the for lower dated maturities or shorter dated maturities are higher than longer dated maturities, and usually that's not the way it works. And usually the yield curve is upward sloping, and then they call that a normal yield curve. But this was an inverted football game. You normally don't get as good a result with pressure. Lamar's had a few games like that this year, and it was not the sample size was not so small. That didn't matter. It was a case of he made some of his really big plays under pressure, and that included the touchdown to Flowers, which was he was initially pressured. The block got beaten and the guy who got beaten was Edwards on the play, and then Lamar scrambled around a little bit. Edwards was able to reset on that same player and got his block made. Gave Lamar time to make a throw that's right on the money. And honestly, I was having a little trouble deciding whether I wanted to make that ATS or pressure because he almost had a second ATS pocket for 3 seconds after the second block by Edwards, and the rest of the line held up beautifully on that play.
Yeah, and it was good to see Lamar being able to. That's good pocket presence. Him being able to maneuver and get into the right spot for his defender. I mean, for his blocker to at least give him a chance. So
exactly, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, good for him, but Lamar's been good against pressure this year, especially if it's. I mean, there's some times where he audibles and you just know it's a screen, and the one where the ball was batted down by Chris Jones was an instance where it was just. I knew they were running a screen. I think anyone in the stadium should know they're running a screen. I think I don't know what other type of audibles or motions we can do to not give away that we're going to run the screen against pressure, but we have to figure it out.
Right. The other big play that Lamar made under pressure was the 54-yard throw left to Flowers. He escaped an initial pressure from Simpson, who got beaten pretty badly. I think it was Tershawn Wharton who did it to him. Let me just take a quick look here. Yeah, Bull then beaten outside by Wharton. So that was a play where he again reset in the pocket, found a nice place. One of the things about the pressure, some of the pressure they faced in this game, when it was only a 4-man rush or even a 5-man rush sometimes, is it was only one guy getting through, and there was some opportunity on some of these plays to reset. Usually one begets many in terms of pressure by matchup. So somebody will try and make up for what's happening, or it'll be the result of a stunt or a twist or something where it creates a jailbreak right away by having two fail. Right at the line of scrimmage. So you often have that happen, but this was a case where Simpson just missed his block in a one-on-one matchup that they probably just designed for Wharton to beat Simpson effectively, and then he didn't get home, and Lamar stepped away, got the ball off well, and sure enough, Flowers had a big play there, and then of course he got up and he couldn't keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, that was very disappointing to see from Zay. I know he's a rookie. I know you're emotional, but yeah, that's tough.
It'll be okay. I mean, honestly, all the things that happened with Flowers this year, there were a number of moments of questionable maturity during the season. I go back to not going down on the play. He's just got to have better field awareness. In was it against the Rams?
Chargers.
Is the Chargers? It's the Chargers. You're right. Yep, the Chargers in LA, and not going down on that play. He scored a touchdown, and it didn't end up mattering because the Ravens ended up doing what they had to do to close out the game. But it was 100% chance to kneel out the game at that point. 100%. You do not take the touchdown in that circumstance, and you got to know better. It's like Roquan Smith has proven he can know better on the field, so he has the right to expect it of everybody else. And next year for Flowers, I mean, a lot of growth and maturity will be needed. And frankly, there's still some growth as a receiver left too. So you had a great rookie year. It's a fantastic place to start, completely worthy of the first round pick. So don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing Zay Flowers for the year he had. I just think there's still more juice to squeeze.
Yep, 100%. And I think this is the first time I've seen Zay Flowers not smile. So I think moving forward, we'll start to see him stop being a kid and start becoming an NFL player, a real grown man. And he has the superstar capability. He said it. We've seen it. Eric DeCosta standing behind him during his presser right after the game spoke volumes to me. I don't care what anyone says. You can't put this game on Zay. It's more than Zay Flowers at this point. It's a lot of factors that go into losing a football game. So pinning it on a young man that pretty much was the guy at receiver all year, next to Likely, and that was it. So it's you got to give him credit where credit's due. You can't bash him for just one mistake. He's not Lee Evans. I'm
certainly not doing that. I know you're not accusing me of that. It's just it is an unfortunate set of circumstances, and maybe a little bit of a learning moment too. He obviously felt terrible on the sidelines about what had happened. Take that into next year and use it, man. Take it into next year and use it.
And he's the type of guy to do that. So I'm 100% confident this is going to fuel him to the next level. And I'm excited to see Zay Flowers next year. I'm excited to see if Bateman comes back as well. He's not getting the opportunities he deserves, and I'm hoping he can get it in Baltimore before we lose out on that.
Or that trade him.
That too, yes.
I mean, I don't see how they can honestly let Bateman go before next year, but they won't pick up his 5th-year option, and they will pick up Owais, and that's going to kind of hurt him, I think. So Owais is it's a no-brainer. I think it's something like $9 million it's going to end up costing them, but there's no way they'll fail to pick up on that. But I don't see how they can pick up Bateman because it's wide receiver money. It's much more significant in terms of the dollars. They could try and re-sign him after this year, which I think would not be a bad call. But there's a whole lot of palms out right now in terms of needing to get money and also need to replace a number of players who are departing in free agency, whether we like it or not.
And also, I don't think Rashad Bateman's willing to take a discount at this point. He's looking to show his potential somewhere in a pass-centric offense.
That would probably be likely, and unfortunately, kind of be a shame also for the Ravens because they'll have lost out on a really good one and a draft pick that I don't think you can. He's been good at times when he's been on the field, and he certainly showed up. I think it was his rookie year. He had over 10 yards per reception, or not per reception, per target rather, which was excellent. But he's availability has been an issue, and then the other thing has been that he just has not always seemed to have had Lamar's attention during his 3 years here. Completion percentage over expectation. That's one of the metrics you'll go out and see on Next Gen Stats. Lamar was 5% below his expectation. I don't know exactly how they do that, but I think it's based on the receiver relative to the coverage as opposed to the pressure the quarterback is facing. But I can't say that for sure. But he was -5 and Mahomes was +8%. So that's not a good combination. That will generally lose you a football game.
Yeah, and I think Lamar didn't have that many interceptable balls, but the really bad one was the first play. The first drive to start the second quarter, the second half in the third quarter, Uh, intended for Zay Flowers. I think Bolton dropped the interception.
Left side. Yep.
That was really the worst throw of the night from Lamar, other than the actual pick. What was disappointing about that is that he had Ricard right in his face in front of the flat, and it seemed like he just got flustered in the pocket and not trusting the protection again. And I can understand that with a guy like Chris Jones bearing down on you and you have Simpson blocking for you, but it's just those situations where I go back to saying where he was locking in on his first read, and the level below that throw, there's someone wide open. I think it's just tough.
If you go back to that game at Tennessee, they won in the COVID year in 2020. It was Ricard's 3 completions on the first drive of that third quarter, which gave the Ravens the lead they never surrendered.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a big part of the offense in that day, and it'd be nice to see him out. He wasn't actually on the field all that much in this game, which is another reason why they weren't running the football. If you're looking for chicken egg relationships, but he was only on for 15 plays. So you're a lot of Ricard's snaps come, of course, when the Ravens already have the lead and are running to close out the game. But in this case, they weren't showing run to the Chiefs with their personnel package.
And it didn't seem like we had any backbreaking calls made. It was like the one call that I have in mind is where Ricard is blocking and then he leaks out right in the flat. And I think that was the Seahawks game where he had the big gain.
Yep.
Things like that. Having plays where it's just the defense doesn't know what's coming. That keeps the offense going and keeps the defense just wondering what's coming next. And it was just unfortunate to see us be really stale in our offensive play calling. To me, it was unfortunate to squander this opportunity the way we did.
Yeah, it's, just one famous thing, and I forget who exactly has said it, and I think it relates to war, and it says, don't give your opponent decisions, give them dilemmas where both outcomes are bad, but they have to choose one nonetheless. Yep. And the ideal one on this play would have been to leak Ricard out in the flat where nobody expects him to be the receiver. They're probably going to not commit a linebacker to that, which is who has to cover that play. Yep. It obviously would depend on zone or man or whatever, but if they're playing any kind of man coverage, it's going to have to be a linebacker who goes after him to chase that down. And then that's a guy who you probably are intending to spy Lamar Jackson. So they have to they're forced into a bad decision either way. That's what you need to do. The edge defender on a boot faces that same decision every time. Go after the quarterback or try and defend that level 0 receiver. And, in that case, they always go after the quarterback and try and create something that'll at least take away the deep ball on that play. But you're forcing them into a decision that hopefully won't work out for them either way. And the Ravens didn't do a lot of that. But you need real tendency breaking plays in order to do that, as you kind of alluded to there.
And it was just wide receiver screens too, no running back screens, tight end screens. So no, like you said, no multiplicity in the offense at all.
Let's talk a little bit about scheme. Hill 39 snaps in this game, Gus 19, Cook 0. A lot of people had Dalvin Cook playing in this game. No snaps for Cook, no pony, no nothing like that. There's 0 pony backfields the whole game, by the way. So they not only did not use Cook and pony, they didn't use him in anything. But they really leaned on Hill, and part of it was they were obviously passing the football primarily and really wanted Hill's pass blocking in there.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. I think I was one of the fans that was disappointed that Hill was in the game as much as he was. I think you give Dalvin Cook at least a couple of shots, especially later in the game. I don't know. There was opportunities where you brought in this Pro Bowl running back for a reason, not just to sit on your bench in the AFC Championship game with no touches. I think you got to give him something. Justice Hill was getting beat on the blitzes all night. It's not like he was having a stellar game either. So you got to give a guy like that a shot, I think, personally.
I don't know if I'd have given a shot to Cook, but I think Hill still gives you some of the explosiveness on offense. But I do understand the frustration of generally Hill not getting it done as a pass blocker, and that hurting the team a lot. They gave Hill some tough decisions to make as a pass blocker here, and Hill was having to go inside or outside. It's definitely not something that Edwards excels at in terms of finding the things. It's very kind of paradoxical who the good pass blocker is of those two. because Edwards is a much bigger human being, obviously, and you would think he'd be the good pass blocker, but it's not true. And part of it is just being decisive and knowing where he has to go for that. And Hill is just much better at finding that player, going lower, usually on that player, often having a better chance to stand him up than Edwards does, and making that work. But it's it was obviously not Hill's night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think when they figured out it wasn't his night, they got to change it and bring a spark plug in or something. I don't think you just play the same hand over and over. I think that's where you get killed, and that's what happened.
14 set blocks and 15 chip blocks on the night. Now that's 0.71. Okay, since they have 41 plays, 29 over 41 is 0.71. That's the 0.71 out of 5 of your eligible receivers on a per play basis that you're either giving up entirely if they're set blockers or disadvantaging significantly if they're chip blockers, because there's only a limited set of routes you can run off that. Very high. I think it was necessary given the amount of blitzes that your Chiefs sent. So I think they were forced basically to do it, but they did sacrifice real receiving talent in this case. Hill, obviously, on a fair amount of this, he had 6 sets and 4 chips, but also likely 1 set and 7 chips in this game. I mean, you're not getting likely into a regular pattern, getting a chance for him to put his arm up for the football somewhere where the defense isn't expecting to be, as we've seen how many times this season now? How many times the last 7 weeks have we seen that happen?
Multiple times.
Yeah. No. Unfortunate. Likely finishes the year very strong. 8 games since Andrews' injury, 34 targets, and this includes Andrews' return. 372 yards and 10.9 yards per target over that period. That's a full season for a lot of tight ends, and that's a remarkable yards per target number in the NFL these days. And certainly in Ravens history, it would be the second highest for a full season, to give you an idea of what he's done since Andrews was hurt.
Yeah, and I'm very pleased with what Likely did this year. I think I'm excited to see this offense and what it does with what pieces we have, especially with the questions we're going to need to answer up front with Zeitler, Simpson, and Stanley. And honestly, Moses is that. I think everyone but the center is going to be questioned coming into the year. I don't know.
You don't think they're going to replace Moses, do you?
I don't think they're going to replace Moses this year. I think they're probably going to work on developing someone in camp like a Falele or someone of that nature to be able to take over for right tackle, because you can see the wheels are coming off of Moses, I think, personally.
I mean, as I've scored it, he's had a pretty effective season. A mid to low B range for the year now. He's certainly outplayed Stanley. In fact, he's outplayed every other offensive tackle on the team. Falele has, what I've liked about him is he's played better these last 4 or 5 games. And it's been little scraps of snaps here and there. It hasn't been a lot of playing time at any one time, but he's accumulated in the high 90s of snaps. And he's graded out to almost exactly the middle of the C range, or right about a 75. That's such a enormous jump in how he's playing. It really does represent, in my mind, development. And I think they have other good news to look forward to on the offensive line that we'll get into in the second show, okay, when we talk a little bit about the offensive line. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the tight end situation here before we move on. Mark Andrews only 18 snaps in this game. If you had the under on Mark Andrews at 3.5 receptions, you won. I hope you did. I actually recommended it on the radio the other day, but I was hoping that some people picked up on that. They ran, let's see, they had 57, 58, whatever they had. They had 18 snaps from Andrews, 39 from Likely, and 2 from Kolar. So basically, they didn't play any 2 tight end packages. Okay, now I'm not including Ricard in that second, even though Ricard lines up on the line of scrimmage some. So from that perspective, they had some 12 personnel they ran with Ricard in line. Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to be misquoted on this. They did run a little bit of 12, but they basically ran 11 and Ricard with an additional running back on some plays wherever he was located, sometimes in the backfield, sometimes, like I said, in line.
Yeah, unfortunate to see them not play the matchup game with some of the really best players that we have on the team. I think them not using Duvernay was disappointing.
Yep.
Especially on just like get Zay Flowers out of the going back and forth in the motion and stop using him as that guy. He needs to be the number one dominant guy on the outside. You're wasting his stamina, his energy. I know he's young, this, that, and the third. There's no reason for it. Get someone we're using $3 million, $4 million on this guy to sit on the bench and return kicks. Have him do something else.
Okay, so that money is a sunk cost right now for me, but I would say I still want what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because the motion I want to see from Flowers is motion that forces the defense into dilemmas or gets him an easy free release off the line of scrimmage. Because if they're up pressing, okay, that's a great time to get him in motion. It's also a great time to have him at the Z and not the X, so he's off the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And you then have an opportunity to to have a yard and a half of him juke the other guy into next week and get free. But one of the most important things for Flowers is just being able to get off the line of scrimmage and get out there in space where defenders are then forced to make bad decisions against him. He draws the attention of multiple defenders. That's what we've wanted the whole year. Having him run even orbit motion, I don't like. But I definitely don't like jet motion. Wasn't effective in terms of running the ball because the defense is keyed on him. It's like Lamar running a boot. It just doesn't end up being as successful as Flacco running a boot because the backside edge defender is always keyed in on that. So it's to me, it's a counterintuitive play. But if you do want to run that some, go ahead and do it. But just do it with Duvernay. Yeah. You can stick him on the field. I don't even care if you're telling the other team you're going to see jet motion when you put Duvernay out there. If 13's on the field, jet motion's coming. Fine. It's like a read option. Then it becomes in terms of maybe it's going to be a jet pitch, maybe it's going to be a handoff, and you're going to have to figure it out. And if you don't read it correctly on your side of the ball, the read going to you might end up with out of position for this versus either Lamar or a running back or some guard moving to level 2 who catches you in the side instead of in the front. So it's a whole lot of good things start to happen when you force misdirection on the opponent, but you don't do it with your number one receiver.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that really upset me with the coaching staff was in the divisional game, I think they should have gave on the sweep and not did it in the AFC championship game. I think showing that on film before an important game gives the other team more to think about so they can respect the jet motion even more. I think it didn't do anything in this game, and it was evident when we gave it to Zay Flowers and he went for 2 or 3. Like doing that last game would have been beneficial to at least setting us up more for some more big plays and giving us the opportunity to maybe put Devin into that position and have him respect it either way since we've already ran it in the previous game, if that makes sense.
Well, there was, one of the things that I guess Monken was talking about his kids saying, why don't you just call the plays who maybe it was his daughter, maybe his wife. His wife, why don't you just call the plays that work?
Yeah.
Well, if it were that easy, I'm sure he'd do it. But the Ravens needed more easy, short yardage, early down plays in this game. They needed more 4 and 5 yard plays like Mahomes had freaking all day. They needed to get the defense a little bit paralyzed in terms of that blitz and get the ball out quickly for some easy tosses and play some Joe Burrow ball against the Chiefs, who, it's a good defense. They have good cornerbacks. They have good talent to chase it down. But the Ravens also have some slippery wideouts and some guys who can do some blocking. Aguilar has been good and likely's been good in terms of a level 2 or level 3 player in terms of making that block. It's something you want to force on your opponent. Yeah,
and I think the one thing that I like about this offense and that I wish we continued to see is the extension of the run game through the pass game. The biggest one that we had today or on Sunday was second drive of the third quarter, first play, Lamar play action fake, roll out right, throws back to Gus left. And that's a quick 14, 15-yard gain. No one's covering it in the flat. I think those kind of situations where we create space for just in the pass game and just a dump off. Like have it, scheme it to be that easy and not make it so complicated where if we can't run the ball through the tackle or through the guards, there has to be another way. Like, we don't have to make it so black and white.
And, you know, frankly, that probably was the place to run it. They ran that first play wide with Hill, and I'm like, come on, up the middle. And that was where they're light. Now, it also may be where they're correcting. And if you did really notice how they were lining up, they were definitely cheating towards the middle of the field in terms of those linebackers and being closer to the line of scrimmage than you normally see them. You know, I'm used to seeing kind of set piece linebackers from the Ravens who are a couple of yards off the ball, spread feet, trying to make their decisions. You saw much more, first of all, because of some of the blitzes. You know, they were trying to scheme. They were trying to get into the backfield more quickly. And that may have been why Monken, by the way, was trying to go to the outside a little bit. Was if you do get outside, you can get a big play if they're rushing 5 or 6 on the play, and they can't get it taken care of right at that point. Right. You know, blitz is very effective against the run. That's, you know, one of the kind of basic concepts. So it's a anyway, it didn't work out, obviously, in terms of how they called it. We need to shut this down pretty quickly here, but I did want to talk a little bit about wide receiver usage. You saw 52 snaps from Flowers, so he was the man for the Ravens, obviously, in this game. 37 from Bateman, 33 from Aguilar, 34 from Beckham. Obviously, fairly equal usage. Are you at all surprised about Beckham's reduced role in these last few weeks of the season?
Yes, very surprised. I don't know what the issue was. Maybe something lingering, or I'm not too sure what the issue was. I know later in the game, the receivers were tired. They were jogging off, trying to get some air, especially near the fourth quarter. They ran a lot of plays trying to get up and down the field, but I'm not sure what the issue was with not being able to get Beckham involved. There was some plays where he had the holding. He had to step on some guys, and Lamar just didn't hit him. I think you can credit some of the issue of Odell to Lamar as well, of just not being able to get him the ball. So it's been disappointing, to say the least, from Odell.
Yeah, kind of a bad finish for Beckham. 7 targets in the postseason for 34 yards. You know, he'd been a lot better than that during the regular season, which had been one of the really big surprising positives of his year with the Ravens. Wasn't the overall yardage, certainly, but the yards per target was good. And so if you can't have aggregate productivity, having per snap productivity obviously is good. They got it from a player like Likely. They got some of it from Beckham, particularly in the second half of the year. Would have been nice for him to show up at the postseason like he did a couple of years ago, I guess, for the Rams at this point. But it just didn't happen. So unfortunate. I would say pretty likely he's played his last step as a Raven. Where are you on that?
Yeah, 100%. Unless he's willing to take Vetman.
You would. I don't think he'd be willing to take that. But I would see. Anything else I want to say? I think I'm good. Frazier, anything else you want to say before we lock it up here for this first part of the show?
Nope, I'm all good.
All right, Frazier, always a pleasure doing these with you. I've really enjoyed doing the matchup shows with you this year. I hope that's something we're able to continue in the future, and have you back on this show as often as you'd like to on the to do offense or maybe some defense sometimes. Tell folks where they can find your work online or contact you if they want to talk football.
You guys can reach me at Twitter/X at F_RAVE8. That's F_Rave8.
All right, other folks out there, it's the off season now. We're looking for content, and I will have some regular series starting up where I'll be looking for contributions from the listeners in terms of historical memories and whatnot. But right now, I'm completely open to all ideas in terms of having a 2 or 3 or 4 part or just a single topic you're passionate about. If you're mad as hell about what just happened, I'll talk to you about that. If you want to talk about how things can be better, how the franchise or how the roster should be constructed differently next year, what moves are important to you, we'll find a way either to have that be an episode or included in Friday Morning GM, but one or the other. And I want to talk to you. Hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I'll get back to you very quickly. People who've been through that process know I'm not just blowing smoke when I will be back very quickly to people about their ideas. Frazier, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.